welcome to this Honors Program Distinguished Speaker Series event with Professor Jack Weatherford, who, as Professor Emeritus and DeWitt Wallace Professor of Anthropology, taught for 29 years at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Dr. Weatherford's work on the role of tribal people in world history, whether Native American, South American, or Asian, has taken him to many and various locations in the world and resulted in a number of books, two of which are on sale out here, you noticed, and he'll be available to sign copies if you're interested following the lecture. Number of books, many published articles, scholarly presentations, and appearances in national and international media. For the past couple of decades, he has concentrated on the Mongols. His book, Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World, is an international bestseller and has been published in more than 20 languages. In 2007, Mongolia's president awarded him the Order of the Polar Star, Mongolia's highest national award, in recognition of his contribution to Mongolian culture. His most recent work, The Secret History of the Mongol Queens, is purported to be the top-selling book in Mongolian history. 2012 was the 850th anniversary of the birth of Genghis Khan, and to honor that anniversary, the Mongolian President's Office sent audiobook recordings of Dr. Weatherford's books, Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World and The Secret History of the Mongol Queens, to be played at all of Mongolia's sacred places from the eastern to the western border. This project took 4 months. To promote its country's culture and heritage, Mongolia has created a foundation and a prize in honor of Professor of Anthropology Jack Weatherford, who is an expert in Mongolian history and culture, clearly. And on January 27th, 2012, the 25th anniversary of the establishment of U.S.-Mongolian diplomatic relations, the Foundation issued its first Jack Weatherford Prize and medal. This medal, modeled on the one given to winners of the Pulitzer Prize, is awarded now annually to the author of the best book or other work of scholarship about Mongolian history or culture written in the Mongolian language. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jack Weatherford.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kane. Thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for coming out tonight. Mongolia is so far from here in so many ways, I can hardly think of a more different place on the planet to be than this beautiful paradise that I was able to enter today. I didn't check the temperature this morning in Mongolia. I usually check it every day. Recently it's been in the -40s on most days, and it doesn't really matter whether you're talking centigrade, Fahrenheit. It's just, and that's not counting the wind chill. And it has already hit -50 absolute temperature this winter in a few places in Mongolia. Typical winter in Mongolia. I'm here in the palm trees to talk about Genghis Khan. This person we all know in history. We know him for most of the wrong reasons, and I'm not going to dwell on those. It's not necessary to deny everything you've ever heard that was bad about him, but it's to show another side of him, of who he was as a person, and especially what was his own approach to leadership. Because the great mystery about him, or the greatest thing to know about him, is that this is not just a conqueror. We look at history sometimes and, oh, we have Napoleon, we have Caesar, and there was Alexander the Great, and there's Suleiman the Magnificent, and all these different. There was only one truly great conqueror in the history of the world. That was Genghis Khan. Compared to what he did in his life, Alexander the Great's empire was perhaps 1/3 of his size. The day Alexander died, his empire died. His generals divided it up. His family members were killed off. It was over. The influence went on, but it was over. Genghis Khan's empire endured for 100 years after he died. It included everything in the world that we have labeled the axis of evil. They were able to come in not only take North and South Korea, all of China, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, but a dozen other countries. They ended up being the only people in history to rule Russia and to rule China, two of the greatest civilizations in the world. What Genghis Khan did in his lifetime is amazing. What's the most amazing part is not just that he did that, the greatest conqueror in the history of the world, but he started with nothing. Nothing. Alexander the Great was a prince. His father was a king. That's a good start in life. His teacher was Aristotle, the greatest teacher of the time. Maybe that was a good start in life. I'm not sure. But he started off with resources. Even Napoleon, who started off fairly poor, was a corporal in the military. Napoleon came into a society where, first of all, they had a written language. They already had an army. They already had ranks. They already had names for things. They already had an organization. He worked his way up. He did many accomplishments that are amazing, very important. But nevertheless, everything existed there. He happened to succeed within what existed. Genghis Khan was born into a tribe that, of course, had no written language. They didn't even really have a name at this time, just a very small group of people on the steppes of Mongolia, still the most isolated, distant place in the world. The most sparsely inhabited country in the world today is Mongolia. 2.7 million people living in a country larger than Alaska. I mean, this is smaller than some of the cities of the United States today. And with this small country of 1 million people in his time, 100,000 soldiers, he conquered nations of 100 million and more, with armies that were larger than his whole nation. This is Genghis Khan. That's enough. I could go on that for hours because I love to talk about what he did, to talk about the law, the language, all of this. But what I really want to get to tonight is a little bit more of who he was as a person. That's what was the most interesting to me, because so often in history he was just a thing that happened, like a storm out of the east or some kind of monsoon that struck. It was just a phenomenon, as though it wasn't a person. But how does a person go from the poorest family in one of the poorest places in the world to being the greatest conqueror in history? I think it starts. We strip away everything. We strip away the title Khan, Genghis Khan. We even strip away his name, Temujin. We just go back. Go back to, he was a person. Before he was a leader, before he was a general, before he was a conqueror, he was a person. And I think that's part of the key, is who was he as a person? What was he like? And I was very fortunate to arrive in Mongolia at the time, first, that was open for the first time to foreign researchers to come in. It was a great moment to enter in the 1990s, because under socialism, the Soviet Union for 70 years had been closed. Before that, closed for 300 years by the Manchu rulers. It had been closed for a very long time. I came in also at the moment when the secret history, this document that for a long time was thought not to exist, it had been found 150 years before I arrived, but it had taken generations to decipher. It was written in a code. So I arrived at a time when we had information that was never before available, and all of a sudden I had access to all the places in that, and tried to piece together who he was as a person. There are a couple crucial events in his life, I think. One of them is that at the age of 8, his father was killed by the Tatars or Tartars. The Tatars had killed his father, and at this time, his mother had 4 children. His father left 2 widows. He left 4 children with one wife, 2 with the other. But Genghis Khan's, or he's just still a kid then, Temujin. Temujin's mother had been kidnapped by his father. She had been married to another man before. She did not come willingly into this. So Genghis Khan's father, Yasuke Batra, is dead. The tribe can't even afford 2 widows and 6 children, of whom the eldest is approximately 9 because he had a half-brother just a little bit older than he was. The tribe can't feed them. Yes, the boys can do some work. There's only 1 girl in the whole group. The women may be able to do some. The tribe can't feed them. They abandoned them on the steppe to die. They took the animals, they took the possessions. Genghis Khan's mother grabbed the banner, the horsehair the horsehair that's tied to a spear of her dead husband and rode out to stop them. And some of them were so embarrassed and ashamed that they did stop for the night and wait till it was dark to abandon her. One old man stood up and ran out in order to try to save the family, and they simply killed him and left him there to die. Genghis Khan ran to him, and then, as it says in the secret history, Genghis Khan cried. This was his entry into history. A boy who is too weak to protect his mother and his family, who has no father, no older brothers, except his half-brother who's more of a rival. This is his entry into history. What's the fate of a person like that? What's going to happen? Well, we know a little bit about his growing up, but I want to just go forward now to a little later. He's 16 years old, maybe 17 years old, not sure at this time. But by this time, he has survived the worst. The family was thrown out. And in the words of the secret history, his mother saved him. She pulled her hat down on her head. She tied up the end of her skirt. She took a black stick and she ran up and down the banks of the river by night and by day, digging roots to fill the gullet of her children. This is the kind of woman she was. She had survived being kidnapped. She had survived all that. She kept those children alive. This is where he grew up, in that environment. He had been kidnapped. He had been briefly enslaved. He had escaped. He had been kept in a yoke or kink. Many things had happened to him already. But he found happiness. 16, you can forget a lot of things that have happened. You can find happiness if you find the right person, and he found the right person. A young girl, Bertha, just a little bit older than he was, because it's kind of the Mongol way, but she was still a little bit older, and he looked at her, and she had fire in her eyes and fire in her face. And he had fire in his eyes and fire in his face. He loved that girl very much. You can imagine, she came to live with him, and suddenly you're 16 or 17 years old. You have all the happiness in the world. You have found everything. And then, one night, they're asleep in the gear. The whole family, all these boys are spraddled around here and there sleeping, and the two mothers and one old grandmother. Don't exactly know how she ended up there, but this grandmother, Kawakchin, is there. Granny Kawakchin is sleeping on the floor, and Granny Kawakchin hears or feels a vibration. She knows horses are coming. Horses are coming. Genghis Khan's mother was the ruler of this family. Not Genghis Khan. He was just a boy of 16 or 17. She was still in charge. She was the one who had taken that spear and ran after the people. She was in charge. She woke up. She ordered everybody to mount the horses. They had 8 geldings at this point. 8 geldings. They mounted the geldings. There was one left over. And there were 2 women left, plus Granny Kawakchin, who didn't have a horse. And Genghis Khan's mother said, those 3 women will stay. The youngest woman will stay. Bertha will stay. This young girl of 18 or 19 years old, the love of his life, will stay. Genghis Khan's mother knew what those men wanted. She knew that they were coming. What she didn't know at that moment was they were actually the relatives of her first husband coming for revenge because she had been kidnapped from them. But she knew if she left that girl there, that her boys and her one daughter could be saved. And they ran off with one horse with no rider into the mountains. This was sort of the last time that anybody made a decision for Temujin. This was the last time, because now he's in the mountains alone. He has his family, but you're alone if you don't have the thing that's most important to you. And now this is the moment. 16 years old, 17 years old. He has known all the suffering that's possible, and he has known the greatest happiness possible. What will he do? Will he go out and find a new girl somewhere? Will he go settle in a new place somewhere? What will he do? Well, you can guess. He decided life wasn't worth living if he couldn't have Bertha back again. That was the most important thing to him. He left that mountain after praying and after thinking. He left that mountain determined he would get her back. He had to go find people to fight with him. He had to make alliances. He had to swear his allegiance to another Khan in the area. He had to do many things in order to get people to go with him. And they went and they found her with the Merkit people. And he rode in at night with his soldiers. He rode in under the moonlight. And as he came in, he was screaming her name. But she, of course, had no idea who was attacking. And she and the other women were loaded onto a cart and being taken away in the night. She didn't want to be kidnapped again. She was going away. And then suddenly, above the din of battle, she heard, "Bertha, Bertha, Bertha." And she went running towards him. She jumped from the cart and ran towards him. And he was in the midst of looking around and looking up, and he didn't even see her coming. And she grabbed the reins of his horse, and he almost struck her. And then he jumped down. It was Hollywood. This is great. It's over. He found the girl. They're 17 years old. Their backs together. In the moonlight, he called her name. She called his name. He grabbed her up. They rode off. I don't know exactly. But it's not Hollywood. He's a kid. Now he's got obligations, military duties to another Khan. He's sworn lifelong allegiance to a blood brother, Anda, in Mongolia. Now he has these, and Bertha is pregnant. There are more challenges for the boy. What to do? Well, the pregnancy was easy. As he said to everybody, "This is my son. This is my wife. This is my son," when the child was born. And it was never accepted. To this day, many people have not accepted it. But nevertheless, he said that at that moment. He took that child, named him Guest, to show he was an honored guest in that family. Tsuch would be an honored member of the family. But now the career of Genghis Khan had begun. Well, I don't want to tell you the whole story of his life because it goes from incident to incident to incident. Because what we want to look at tonight are some of the lessons then that this growing up that he learned, that he applied in some new ways. Most of the lessons that he learned, there's no secret that I don't think you have not already heard about some way or other. What's difficult about the lessons of leadership are fairly easy to articulate and say. They're difficult to follow and to do. They're difficult to enact in life. And that's where his true genius came about. He discovered these principles on his own. He had no teacher. He had no great general to lead him. He didn't even have a living father to teach him how to fight. He had none of that. He had to learn this stuff for himself. So some of it he learned in the wrong way, we might say, which ended up making him even smarter, even more of a genius. One was right there. We already see the lessons of loyalty. He saw what his mother had done for her children. He felt his own loyalty towards Bertha, towards this young woman with whom he was. He understood loyalty. Loyalty became one of the most important principles of his organization. All of his generals started off in life as poor herders. That was it. No military education or training. They were not born to the aristocratic clans on the steppe. They were not the aristocrats. He learned through time and time again that every time he made peace, the aristocrats would betray him. They would change their allegiance. They would go on. But the poor guys who had become attached to him in his early years, they never betrayed him. Not one of his generals ever turned against him. Not one ever accepted money to go to the other side. Not one of them. But family members? Oh, over and over they were betraying him. By this point, he's already killed his half-brother, who was his own. We won't go into that story tonight, because we're talking about the leadership principle. That's maybe one of them, but I don't want to bring that one up. He had learned the importance of loyalty. He felt it towards others, and he realized how important. Loyalty doesn't come by birth. Loyalty doesn't come by the education of the aristocratic people. Loyalty came from his personal relationships. And this followed him through his whole life. In the end, this is going to be the first principle, and unfortunately, it's going to turn out at the very end to be one that begins to break down even in his own life. Nobody follows their own principles all the way through. Nobody is perfect in adhering to even what they want to adhere to. And towards the end of life, he does begin to favor kinship, his sons, over loyalty of the men who had fought for him. But that's at the end. So loyalty was extremely important. And the theme comes up over and over in his life in many, many different ways. Just one brief example is when his best friend, who turned out to fight against him, and they were rivals for a long time, and then his best friend's soldiers brought him in. Jamuka's soldiers turned him in. Genghis Khan executed all the soldiers first for having betrayed their leader. Even though it was, for this time, the rival to Genghis Khan, they had betrayed their leader. He executed them. He did that more than once in his history. People learned you don't ever take your leader and turn him into Genghis Khan because he will kill you right away. Loyalty, very important principle. Communication. This is where it gets modern. This is one reason I talk about the founding of the modern world. Communication became one of the most important things. But first of all, they're steppe people, and they realize the importance of communication. People who live in a fortified city or fortified anything, communication is a little bit easier because everybody's there. You make an announcement, you holler from the tower, you call them together, beat a gong, ring a bell, do something. Communication is relatively easy. But for an army that's always out there, and always moving spread out because there's no road. And so the army, you can't just all go single file with 20,000 horses marching through because what are they going to eat if they're all following? No, they spread out over hundreds of kilometers as they cross the steppe because the horses have to eat. And you've got to maintain communication. He developed a very good communication system. And I wish I could tell you step by step and piece by piece what that was. Unfortunately, I don't know, because so much of his communication system, he did not communicate with the outside world. It was secret, but a couple of simple principles. He adopted an alphabet. He borrowed it from the Uyghur people, He borrowed this alphabet and had some people come in and adapted the Mongolian language, and that became the official language of his empire, and he adopted that in 1204, 2 years before he founded the empire. So he had a written language. He did not allow the military to use written language. That was for law, not for the military. He did not trust the words because he felt a written word has no loyalty. A written word, anybody who can read has access to that word. The word will give itself to anybody who opens the page and knows how to read it. Whereas he knew his soldiers would never give up their word to the wrong people. If they are captured, they will endure everything until death without revealing his message. He relied on oral communication. Very complicated. You've got an empire that's going to very soon stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean. It's going to go from the Indus to the Arctic. It's going to go from the Yellow River to the Volga, and then down past that after his death. How do you communicate across? He developed a system, or I think was already in use in Mongolia. There are pieces of it that we sort of think we know, and I'm not too sure about it, but anyway, in which they were using rhyme and they were using poetry. I don't know, anyone here teaches poetry? It's very hard to believe that a great army was founded and operated on communication of poetry, but I do believe that. It's said, and I know the Mongolians and how they work and how they think and how they operate, and I believe it. It was an empire based upon poetry for communication. He also created this, we'd say today, a Pony Express system. Across wherever he went, messages were flying back and forth. And he did not build a city. He never built one fortress. He did not build a palace. He did not build a temple. He did not build a wall of any sort ever. But he did build bridges across rivers. He did have roads made. He did have wells dug. And along these lines, the communications would race back and forth across Eurasia. Communication became extremely important to him. Communication. Movement, of course, is going to be important for any army. But with Genghis Khan, it was movement combined with communication. The opposites, things always go with their opposite. Communication is the opposite of secrecy, but it's kind of the same thing. You want everybody communicating that you want communicating and nobody communicating that you don't want. And so they operated many parts secretly from the outsiders while they were communicating with the inside. And also then the movement of the army also had to be based upon communication inside, but secrecy outside. To move along the route that is least expected. So with the Silk Route out there, you have trails. The armies have been going back and forth. The Arabs, the Chinese, the Tang Dynasty had passed through there, sending their armies into Central Asia. Before that, you had all kinds of Sogdians. You had the Uyghurs, the Tibetans had come. Armies had been coming and going and coming and going. And all those routes were known. Genghis Khan never took that route. Genghis Khan took the route that no one expected. They crossed the desert, right through the worst part of the desert no one had ever crossed, as far as anybody knew. No one was expecting it. No one anticipated anybody could do it. He struck by surprise, and he moved fast. He moved across the Eurasian continent like lightning, and that word was used at that time. Later we associate that word with blitzkrieg from the World War II, the lightning war. But the word was also used at that time for how his army was. Not just the speed, but also that it just struck from nowhere with no apparent reason. All of a sudden, it was there. And he did not strike necessarily the points that people most thought he would. He sometimes went for the weakest points first. It was very important for him. When the United States decided to invade Iraq, which the Mongols did successfully, and they installed a government that lasted for 100 years, peacefully. Anyway, when the United States decided, right away we had this strategy of they were going to go fast. Okay, that part's similar. Head straight for Baghdad. That's not the Mongol way. Fast, yes. Baghdad, no. No, you don't go straight to the city and attack the main point and try to hold it, because you're going to be lost in a city. Mongols hated cities. In fact, Genghis Khan, so far as we know, only once entered a city that he conquered. Very often, the last few weeks of the war, once it was clear that this part was going to be conquered, he withdrew and would leave it to other allies, not Mongols, to enter the city, the Khitan people, or in the case of later with Baghdad, it was particularly the Christian army, the Armenians, for example, who are fighting with him, and also the Shiites, who of course were anxious to get into Baghdad, but other groups of people to go into. No, he didn't go. The United States went straight for Baghdad, took it, never quite held it. The United States created its own little fortress in the middle. Genghis Khan's army never occupied Baghdad. They took the city, they had their allies go in, do the work that needed to be done. The Mongols kept their capital outside. They would first strike all of the weakest links until there's nothing left but Baghdad. Every weak link is controlled by them. They surround the place. They own the countryside. And then they came up with another thing that Genghis Khan was very good at. This thing, we all think we're good at this. All of us believe this. Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. Learn from your lessons and apply practical things. Yes, that's me, that's me. The truth of the matter is most of us, I'm speaking for most of us now, but most of us, I think, we really tend to repeat most of the same mistakes. There's a tendency, we did it wrong once, we're going to keep doing that wrong until it's right. And that point usually doesn't come, except in our explanations to our friends and other people about, you're getting a fourth divorce? Yeah, it was, well. Genghis Khan learned, he was out there, he had to learn from the world, not from a teacher, not from someone, from the world. He learned by example, and then he developed new ideas. So one of the first things that he did when he came to a city, I mean, this is a guy who's never seen a city. But can you imagine? To my knowledge, when he first went to attack the first city, to my knowledge, he had never seen a building of any sort other than one with felt walls made out of wool. There was no building in all of Mongolia at this time. So I don't think he had seen it. But when he came, looked at this, you know, okay, you've never attacked a city before. They've got this huge wall. It's massive. It looks like a mountain cliff. What are you going to do? Let's take that river over there, and let's see what happens if we bring it over here and try to knock down that wall with the river, because I don't think my bows and arrows and men can knock down that wall. Let's do the river. Well, they tried it. They diverted the river. Mongols are not good at this kind of thing. It was engineering. Fortunately, the Chinese were helping, but still, they're not good at engineering and rediverting rivers. They'd never done that before. So, of course, they destroyed their entire basic camp without hitting the wall the first time around. But he learned. He learned. Yes, this is going to work. I've destroyed my camp, but hey, it can destroy theirs. By the time they get to Baghdad 30 years later, they have the technique down. They do not need to enter the city. They chopped down all the trees all around and made that into kind of like a, I don't know what to call it, like a flaming missile or something. So you have these burning trees that they throw into the city, and then once they've done that, they kind of cause havoc and fires everywhere they could. They divert the river. Wasn't the first or second or third time they had done this. Diverted the river, knocked down the walls of Baghdad, of course, seized the city. Learn from practical experience, learning from the world around you, from nature, applying those lessons and adjusting it when you did it incorrectly. Genghis Khan did not lose many battles. He chose them carefully, because you choose the weakest link, you choose the battle you can win. The objective is not to go out there and be chivalrous and walk, shake hands, and how are you, and let's exchange flags after it's over, and we'll have tea in the tent. He wasn't that kind of a warrior. He fought to win. He fought the weakest link first, then you go to the next weakest. You work your way up the chain like that. This was his philosophy. This was his approach to warfare. So when he came out and he applied these lessons from his own life, these were not abstract theoretical ideas. They were the practical lessons of a herder applying a hunter and a herder, applying what he knew from growing up. So Genghis Khan stressed communication. It was the movement, to move secretly, to move fast, to move without expectation on the people whom you are attacking. But another point is perhaps most difficult for us to accept is that he also believed in a system based upon, and this is maybe reflective of his belief in loyalty, but based upon law. Law. Very simple law, maybe not the law that we agree with. The law was you surrender. That's kind of basic. But if you surrender, you have all the rights that you had before. You keep your property, you will not be molested, you will not be robbed, you will not have your world destroyed, you will not be killed. Very simple. But if you resist me, I will destroy you, take everything I want. If you surrender to me and then later rebel, everybody and everything will die. It was a harsh law. There is no question about it. But it was a law. There was a principle there. And he was so determined to uphold the first part of that. If you surrender, you will not be molested. He was also so interested in the in the principle of loyalty, in upholding that even above kinship, that when his daughter's husband, Tokachar, when his daughter's husband, his son-in-law, whom he had chosen, his son-in-law, who was a general in his army, looted a city that had surrendered to Genghis Khan, even though that was a member of his own family. He called the young man in, he stripped him of his rank as general, reduced him to the lowest rank in the Mongolian military, and he had to ride on the front horse in the next battle against the next city. He did not return from that battle. Genghis Khan's law was very serious. It's so serious that today, finally, in 2006, Mongolia created its first statue of Genghis Khan in all of its history, the first statue. And you think about the statue that you might build to the greatest conqueror in the history of the world. Oh, yes, and today there's another statue made in Mongolia with him on a horse, but that wasn't the official one from the government. It's a different one, and there are other statues in other places of him. But the Mongolians chose as their model the American statue of Abraham Lincoln, seated at his memorial because he was the great lawgiver of America who united his people through law and through war and who granted freedom to all the people of America. This is the way the Mongolians see. He to them is like Abraham Lincoln. So Genghis Khan is seated, modeled after Abraham Lincoln. Their concept of him is he was the great lawgiver. So he had communication. He had loyalty. He placed friendship or loyalty of people above birth, above aristocracy. Eventually it got to the point that when he conquered a people who did fight against him, he killed all the aristocrats. He wiped them all out, all the rich people, all the family. He didn't bother to try to intermarry with the ruling family to have some... No, they were useless to him. They couldn't defend their own people against him. How are they going to help him defend against somebody? They were useless. He killed off the rich, and that's one reason he became so famous in history as a great barbarian, because the aristocrats are accustomed, yes, you kill a few of us, but for heaven's sake, we're all equal. You kill the common people. Yeah, slaughter them. You don't kill us. These principles of loyalty, abiding by the law, communication, the movement fast and quick across the countryside, these were the primary principles of Genghis Khan's secrecy. This is why the people who were loyal to him remained loyal throughout his life. This is why he was so beloved by his people that even now they honor him as the great lawgiver of their country. He founded them. He gave them their name. He gave them their first law. He gave them their written language. He gave them their army that still exists to this day. Genghis Khan was a great conqueror, but he was a leader. And the final point that I think is perhaps the most important about him, you remember how he was born. You remember the circumstances of that, being cast out on the steppe with his family and poor and all. He was born in a ger, just in a yurt, in a felt tent in the steppes of Mongolia. He died in a ger, in a felt tent, in a yurt. He died there. He had conquered the greatest empires of the world. He had accumulated probably more wealth than any person in world history, today, then, any time, any person in the history of the world. He didn't keep it. He didn't keep it. It came to him, it went out. It went out. He gave it away. He gave it to people. First, people to get a share, and that's how Mongolians thought it's divided up into shares. First people to get a share are war widows and orphans. Mongolians do not honor the war dead. Sounds very strange, not the way we honor. You don't put their name up. You don't build a statue to them. You don't tell the story of how they were killed in battle and how they sacrificed themselves. No, you don't do that. You honor them by not speaking their name. You don't write it on a memorial. You honor them by letting their spirit go, but you finish their work on this planet. You complete their battle. You complete their service, and part of that is you take care of their family. That's what's important. It's not to write the name and have a ceremony and ritual and come back every year to honor them. No, you take care of their children. You raise them up, and that's what Genghis Khan did. War widows and war orphans, because he was kind of a war orphan himself in a certain way, they were taken care of first. And after every battle, he also adopted one child, left orphan from the enemy side. He adopted that child who became Mongolian, who became his brother or his child, depending on how you look at it, because he gave him to his mother to raise, of course. She'd done a good job with him. And so she raised up these war orphans. So he was a man, he died in a ger. He died in a felt tent. He died as poor, basically, as the day he was born. He was wrapped in felt, not in the great silks. All the silks had come through, the gold, the silver, the diamonds, the jewels. The wealth of the world had passed through him, and it enriched his people. It enriched his people. Maybe to a fault. Maybe it went too far. Maybe the Mongols were starting now to weaken a little bit, so maybe that wasn't a perfect plan. But I said at the end of life, he himself had not stuck with every one of the things that he believed, each of these principles. The end of life came, and if you're going to talk the principles of loyalty, you're going to talk about the principles of promoting people according to ability, according to practicality, according to learning, there's a good chance that that's not going to be your own sons. There's a good chance that it's going to be somebody else. But Genghis Khan did love his sons. He loved all 4 of his sons, and he called them all 4 his sons, no matter what anybody else may say. But these 4 sons, Genghis Khan didn't realize till late in life, they did not grow up the way he did. He grew up and experienced one thing. They grew up with a powerful father. They grew up in a much more sheltered life. Not necessarily luxury at first, but they were certainly more sheltered. They had a better life than he had had. They didn't grow up with the same lessons. They grew up with more faults than he had. Oh, they enjoyed the life. The wealth was coming through, and a lot of alcohol was coming through. We used to only have mare's milk to drink, and we could ferment it, but then the mare's milk ran out. It only lasted about 3 months, so we could stay drunk for 3 months. But now we control the world. We have rice wine. We have mead. We have grape wine. We can have it every single day, and they did. His sons are drinking. His sons are fighting, quarreling with each other. They go to conquer a city. One knows he's going to inherit the city, so he doesn't want the city burned. He doesn't want the city flooded because he's going to inherit it. The other one just wants to get this battle over because he wants to get to the city that he's going to inherit. They're not cooperating. Genghis Khan's calling them in. He's going back to the battlefield with them. He's trying to go over it. He's trying to lecture to them. He looks around to find the greatest sages in the world, the greatest Muslim scholars, the greatest Taoist scholars. He calls them in to try to teach them. It's too late. These are middle-aged men. It's hard to teach a middle-aged man anything. It's not working. But he can't give it up. These are his sons. He wants them to have his empire. And at the end of life, he decides in a way to violate his own principle. I have to say in a way because I can't quite say that. But to go against his own instinct. It's not going to be ability. It's not going to be loyalty. It's going to be based upon kinship. These are my 4 sons. And actually, his favorite was his firstborn son, Zuch, the guest, the one born at the end of this great campaign. And so he wanted Zuch to inherit it. He called the sons together to discuss it. And of course, the eldest of the other 3, the second-born son, jumps up and says, "What? How can you let this merchant bastard claim this empire? You know he is not your..." Genghis Khan says, "You were not there. How do you know what happened? If I tell you he was my son, who are you to tell me that he was not? You don't know what it was like in those days when people were fighting and stealing and robbing. Your mother never loved another man. Your mother did not go willingly with other people. You don't know what happened. You have no right." And the son said, "Of course, father. But a deer that's shot with words cannot be loaded onto a horse. A deer that's shot with words cannot be eaten. Yes, we may have to say he's our brother, but we know he is not." Genghis Khan knew they were not going to cooperate. He could order them to accept Zuch. They would do it as long as he was alive. He knew it would not work. Already, his empire is going to begin to crumble. Already the beginnings are there. The cracks are there. So he gave Zuch the most distant part. He gave him Russia. Go there. Stay on that side of the river. Go to Russia. He divided the empire, set it under one son, under his third son. He couldn't give it to the one he wanted. He wouldn't give it to the second one because the second one was so nasty in that episode. So he chose the third son because he was the least hated by the other brothers. He was the most friendly because he drank the most and he laughed the most. And so that's not a way to run an empire. Yes, it lasted 100 years. That's because of the strength of Genghis Khan. It's because of his strength. But at the end, already, we see the fault lines. And like a great diamond, the fault lines may not break for a long time until they are hit but eventually it will break. And that was already there from the beginning. These are a few of the communication issues. But I do believe if Genghis Khan were alive today, he'd be flying an airplane. He had adopted and adapted every form of technology that he could find. He was innovative in every approach that he had. And something that would move him fast, could communicate, and I think he would have loved that. I think maybe somewhere in his own heart he even thought about such things, because they used whistling arrows and other things that flew through the air to communicate. And I think the idea was there, because in their belief system, a great man could fly at night. A great man could take a stick, it's like a flying horse is a stick, and could fly at night. So I think in his mind he had already been here. He had already seen this place, maybe not the palm trees and the beach and some things like that, because he never saw the ocean, but he saw some parts of it. So I thank you for listening to my comments tonight, and I'm going to open it here just a second for comments, corrections. So sometimes I get to talking and I throw out the wrong date and say 2006 instead of 1206 or something, so maybe we have to correct some things. And disagreements, because this is my view of Genghis Khan, and I present that because I truly believe it. But I don't necessarily think everybody else is going to. Many people in the world have a much different vision of him than my vision. And I don't want to change people's vision. I only want to give them an alternative view. This is how I see it for people, because I think that he is a modern man of the modern world. I think his lessons are today important for us. These are the same lessons that we need today, whether it's in warfare or in life. Genghis Khan, he was a simple man. He was born on the steppe. He loved a girl at 16. It set the course of his whole life. He conquered the world. Thank you very much.
We'll open the floor to questions. If you would, please just wait for the microphone so everyone can hear the question, and then we'll see what kind of response we get.
Yes, I enjoyed that immensely. Since Genghis Khan became really almost more of a legend than a person that we can feel close to, and in reality, are you comfortable with the interpretation of the secret book in terms of validation and validity, in terms of, I mean, how much has sort of later on, because the Mongols obviously worshipped him in some way, how much have they made legend, and how much have they really accurately portrayed what really happened?
Yeah. Oh, your question gets to the heart of what I was trying to do, portray him as a person. And then the secret history was very important to me in doing that. And I certainly believe that it's valid in most aspects, but it's kind of like the Bible. I mean, the Bible has a lot of historic facts in there. It has a lot of things that are legend, perhaps, or depends on your belief about how the Bible is, but they include stories of different things, parables that are not necessarily true, but they're illustrating a point. And certainly the secret history contains that. But what's most important to me about the secret history is it was secret, so it wasn't for other people to read. So we have information in there that no other source revealed. Many of the facts in there are corroborated by other sources. But for example, his crying, twice it's reported in that he cried. This isn't the kind of thing you write in a book that you're just trying to honor somebody as a great hero. He killed his half-brother. It was not known beforehand. Then later they realized that certain references to things related to that, but it was not known that he killed his own half-brother until the secret history. So these are the kind of things that are revealed in there. And then there are even discussions that transpire in bed when he is with his wife. So it's somebody who's sleeping in the ger there. I don't think we even know who it was, who has reported this. Now, yes, people lie. Yes, they misinterpret. Yes, they get it. They make mistakes. There are many things like that. So as you go through, you have to use that kind of an eye always about it. And even some pieces were changed later in history. You have to look at it very carefully all the way through. But there is so much rich information that he does come alive as a person. He was afraid of dogs. I mean, who's going to put that in a book about, you know, here's the greatest conqueror in the world? Oh yeah, he was afraid of dogs. And this was his own father was quoted as saying, oh, be careful with him. He's scared of dogs. He'll cry. Okay, so you have this kind of information that he really starts to come alive. But you have to use it judiciously. You can't accept every single thing in there. You have to think about it. Does it fit with other facts? Thanks.
Sir, what was his motivation in conquering such a huge area, far more than he could personally enjoy?
I cannot honestly answer that question. I certainly thought about it a long time. In the end, it's very hard to know anyone's motivation, even your own. You know, you did something, you think, what? Yeah, I did that because I was trying to help. Or you think up something, but you don't even know why. I mean, I think I thought I understood something of the process without understanding completely the motivation. But if we look at that first episode, I do emphasize that it's so important because I think he was trying to basically just get back Bertha and then have a peaceful life. But then he's engaged in these other battles, and so he's expanding, and so he has to fight for Ong Han, this other Han, and he has to get involved in other feuds, and it keeps growing, and he's trying to create peace for his family and a quiet life. I don't want to in the end say that's his whole motivation in life was to create peace, but I do think the process started there. He wanted a peaceful life with his family, then he's involved with something, so he's got to fight that battle, and he goes out and he fights the Tartars, he defeats them, he comes back. A year later, you're fighting the Tartars again. And he does this over and over, the same fights over and over. He was really trying to end that. He wanted, I'm tired of this. I fight the same enemy over there. So then he said, okay, we're going to kill all the aristocrats, the people who are leaders, because they rebel against us. So he tried that for a while. He tried different things as a way to start imposing peace. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing. And then finally, later in life, I think he began to see that maybe he had some special mission. He began to see himself in a different way. He became a little bit more, even perhaps spiritually motivated, that he was destined to control the world, that his people were destined to rule the world from sea to sea. And so I do think that's the process, and precise motivation at each point is hard to specify. I think it starts personally, it gets a little more abstract as life goes on, broader. It's coming.
Suspense is too much.
Thank you, Michelle.
My question is about you. You are so romantic and passionate about...
oh, can I tell my wife? Oh, yeah.
Sure.
A lady in Daytona told me I was, wait, let me get this romantic.
Will you share with us what happened when you were 8 or whatever? How did
That's
you
on
get
tape, by the way.
so interested in Mongolia? That's the first part, how you reached this interest. And secondly, I'd be interested in your thoughts about contemporary Mongolia and its body politic and how Genghis Khan's legacy plays out in the way Mongolians look now at the world.
Yeah. Well, the first part, you know, as a kid, I was interested in these kind of books that are like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan and some of these kind of books. I enjoyed them a lot. And I was fascinated with Mongolia, and then later, a bit of a nerdy kid, I was collecting stamps, and I had 5 stamps from Mongolia, and 2 of them were triangles. I thought, wow, but go to the post office and get a triangle stamp and lick it, and wow, and the camel had 2 humps. It's like, wow, it's even better than the regular camel. You know, it's just, you know, and I pictured, of course, palm trees, camels, palm trees. I didn't exactly have a good picture. Then later on, I was in college. And started thinking about things, and I wrote off a letter to Mongolia. Is it possible to come? I never had an answer. The United States did not have diplomatic relations at the time with Mongolia. We had no exchanges, nothing. I don't even know where the letter went. Then later I was in graduate school. I wrote another letter. Never got an answer to that. You know, you put aside childish dreams. You just go on with your life. And I continued with anthropology and studying tribal people around the world. And that was just one that I was interested in. And it wasn't the end of everything. It didn't work out. And then, of course, the 1990s came and Mongolia opened and the Soviets withdrew. And I'm already in my 50s when I arrived in Mongolia in the 1990s. And there's no question I'm not going to be doing any Mongolian stuff. I just want to read the books that I would have read had I been here or learned. And I realized the books hadn't been written. Now, and I thought, well, maybe all these Russians were doing research or Poles. And yes, a few, but very few were allowed in. It was closed even to their sister socialist republics for all this time. Mongolia was a closed country. Genghis Khan's name had hardly been uttered in public in 70 years. The only prime minister to do anything to try to honor him in 1962 was chopped up with an axe. And even my editor, when I wrote that, they said, "You put 1962. And I said, yes, 1962. He was chopped up with an axe. I arrived there, I'm not going to, but the things weren't there. The books weren't there. The knowledge was, and I fell in love with Mongolia. I was fortunate to arrive at nighttime. My flight was delayed about 18 or 24 hours. I can't even remember. I do remember the food that we had. We were given a small bottle of vodka, a Korean chocolate bar, and a beef tongue. That's what the flight came in on, and we arrived late at night. It was like 2 in the morning or something. I was supposed to leave for the country early the next day. I didn't get to see the city. Fortunately, I didn't see that city that time. We left before daybreak, so then suddenly the sun starts to come up. I'm out there on the steppes of Mongolia. It is just overpowering to me in every way. I fell totally in love with Mongolia within 24 hours. It was, and then it's like, okay, it's like romantic and passionate. Yeah, it's like going back to the 50th high school reunion, and oh, that's the one you know, time's been good, you know. I say this with all due respect to my wife. I've said it in her presence. She and I were in high school, so she is the one, unfortunately, in that case. So I'm very, very lucky about that. And we have been almost 50 years. So, I fell in love with the place, but it was also my childhood. Here it was again, and I remembered my stamps and the two-hump model of a camel and the dreams, and there were no palm trees. But I was a kid again, and it was excitement, and I was old enough not to worry about tenure. My own kids were, I don't know where they were. Well, my son was off in military, the Citadel. He calls it a military school, I guess. At the Citadel in South Carolina. My daughter had already graduated from college. Their life was going on. They didn't need me, that's for sure. They had spell check now. And here I was, a kid again. And that's really how I felt. I just fell in love with Mongolia. And then, fortunately, I had a very tolerant wife, and I can't share, she shared the experience. I can't say she shared all the love. I mean, she loves it, kinda, but the way you love something that somebody you love loves. And so we spent a lot of wonderful time there. We're very happy in Mongolia. We've had a wonderful, wonderful life there. The Mongolian people are so kind and good to us beyond words. And as for today, I'm a 100% booster of Mongolia. I believe in Mongolia's future. Yes, there are problems, but you look at the former socialist countries of Central Asia, you look at all the stands. Mongolia is the only one that's democratic. Yes, it has problems, but who doesn't? Our democracy has plenty of problems. We have issues. We have issues with freedom of the press. We have issues with voting irregularity. We have all, oh yeah, this is Florida, I don't need to go there. Yes, we have issues, or Mongolians have issues, but they are a struggling country trying to create democracy, trying to create, again, the rule of law. And it actually happens that a man whom I respect very much, who is mentioned here, the man who was the president in 2007, who awarded me the Polar Star of Mongolia, President Iqbal, he's a man whom I respect very much. Honor him. He was a president who did many wonderful things, but he is in prison now for certain things in Mongolia. And so it's a country that is struggling very hard to create a rule of law that says what Genghis Khan said. Every person, even the son of the great Han or the president of the country, must abide by the law. And even if the law, maybe in some cases, is not done fairly and correctly, you must abide by the law. So it's a nation that's struggling. And it does have problems. There are absolutely no question. But I believe in the future of Mongolia. And Mongolia is trying hard to be a part of the world. They're part of every peacekeeping mission that the United Nations has everywhere in the world, even though they only have about 6,000 soldiers. They have 2,000 abroad. They went with the United States to Iraq. They went with the United States to Afghanistan. They have soldiers who are now in the South Sudan. They went to Bosnia. They went to Senegal or to Sierra Leone to help with the trial. They've been everywhere to try to help be a part of the world system today in a polite and peaceful way. Mongolia is struggling. They have problems. But I love Mongolia and I respect Mongolia. Yeah, there's nothing objective about anything I say. So I'm just honest about that. You know. But you know my biases. Yes, I'm a professor, but this is the way I feel. And so.
Hello, my name is Beckett. I'm from Kazakhstan, and I know about Genghis Khan a lot.
Tell me again, you're from where?
Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan?
Yeah.
Yes.
So how, in your opinion, what's the influence of Genghis Khan's conquest on the surrounding areas, countries, like nowadays, or like 18th century, 19th centuries?
A very close relationship with Kazakhstan. Are you Kazakh? Okay. Because I know there are a lot of Russians who were not so favorable towards him, although some are. But the Kazakh people have always been much more favorable towards Genghis Khan, much more loyal to his history. And of course, I mentioned the second son, Tsagade. Tsuch, the first son, was given Russia, and then the central area went to Tsagade's son, Tsagade and his sons, eventually and his heirs. And so Kazakhstan developed a very, very close relationship. And today, of course, the only real minority group in Mongolia are the Kazakhs, the western province of Mongolia. Mongolia has a very close relationship to Kazakhstan in many ways. I think Mongolians feel perhaps more respectful towards Kazakhstan than maybe most Kazakhs feel today towards Mongolia, because Mongolia is a much poorer country. I think the Kazakhs have been very good about honoring the history. They, of course, financed the making of this big movie called Mongol by Bodrov, trying to improve the image of this part of the world. So the Kazakh people and the Mongol people have been very close. And in the capital city today, everywhere you go, you find Kazakhs in Mongolia. As far as the impact on the other countries, I'm not so sure. It's been, I think, much greater than most of the countries will permit to be said. China, I think, had a much greater impact from the Mongols than they want to admit. They admit a few things. Yes, they increased the empire, so on, but there are many aspects about Chinese administration that the Mongols brought in, many things that the Mongols added to China, and I think they tend not to see it. The Kazakhs are probably the most friendly, and then perhaps the Koreans would be next in their attitudes towards the Mongols. Koreans also, I think, the Mongols like the Koreans, perhaps more than the Koreans think or like the Mongols. Mongolia looks to Kazakhstan as more of an economic model, not as a political model, but some economic things because they've been able to use their resources in a way the Mongolians look to. They look to Korea for Gundam style, for, well, they look to Korea for pop culture and for all the wonderful things, for fashion, for music, for excitement, for all the wonderful things of life. They look to Korea. Whereas with Kazakhstan, they look in a much more serious way. So today, I think Mongolia perhaps is influenced by its neighbors more than Mongolia influences them, but the historic role, I think, was very great. But I was trying to show it for the whole world. I didn't want to regionalize it in my book, and so I tended not to talk about one place. I tended to talk about the whole world. You're from a beautiful country. I love that country very much, because it's like Mongolia in a lot of ways.
Hello. I have a question here.
Oh, yes.
I met a friend here on campus who was an airline pilot for Mongolian Airlines for 12 years.
Miat.
And I
Yes.
asked him this question, and he deferred the answer to your talk for tonight. So I'm interested about the rules of law that you referred to, and what about his rules of war? Was he an ethical warrior, or is it true that he was a rapist of women and murderer of children? Because I've heard that second only to the largest empire in the history of the world, was the largest personal spread of DNA in the world.
Yes,
Is that true?
the spread of Genghis Khan's DNA. I don't know. I cannot answer that. I think there are some problems with that research. It's a very interesting idea. However, to address your issues, yes, I think he was scrupulous. First of all, if to go back to a very simple problem, with 100,000 soldiers, and even 1 million people, to rule over hundreds of, you don't do it by force. You do not do it by force. You don't control China by force. You've got to have an awful lot of people who are siding with you. They see something in it. You don't control the Muslim world by force. You come in, you offer something to a great number of people. He found out that often you can offer religious freedom and the minorities will flock to you. You offer a certain kind of rights for minorities, they will flock to you and stand by you. So he's appealing to a very large number of people. But also, he appealed to certain classes. Aristocrats he killed off, but the merchant class, he gave them greater freedoms than they'd ever had before. He raised their status, he lowered their taxes. It's almost like a good Republican agenda, except he had environmental policy of Al Gore, maybe. I've been accused of saying that. I never said that. But, so in warfare, I think he was scrupulous. You sided with him, you would not be hurt. You would be protected, your taxes would be lower, your life would be better in many ways. Anybody who had a skill had a certain honored status, regardless of your birth. So people flocked to him because of his law in the way it applied to warfare. That's the primary reason. And then secondly, the way it applied to peace, but it's for the warfare. Now, if you rebelled against him, I said he killed everyone, and that's true. They did. There were several cities. They killed everyone in the city. It happened. Several. Not millions of people, but several cities. The people rebelled. They had sworn their allegiance, and he killed them. The whole issue that's been raised of rape about the Mongolians, because even now in English, we very often call Down syndrome children Mongols. And the reason was because, well, they're not really belong to the European race. They are just descendants from the rape of the Mongols. That's where this whole theory came from. This is how ingrained this in. Rape from the Tatars, the Mongols. I know of no documented case where that happened. Genghis Khan married a certain number of women. He only had 4 wives at a time ever. Bertha was always the primary wife. He married some, it was just a couple that was a ritual, and then they went from him to another person. They married another general. He had primarily 4 wives. One of them accompanied him on every campaign, and he was with her. The Mongol whole masculinity is so different than ours. I had mentioned before, Bertha was older than Temujin, because usually, even to this day, very often the female is older than the male. And the idea is that the male, he has things going on in his life. He has animals to take care of. He has wrestling. He has horses. He has archery. He does not chase after women. That's just, who has time for that silliness? They wait for, it's the tradition, for the woman makes the move. She's the one who chooses the guy. She's the one who instructs him because she's old. It's a very different sort of sensibility about romance. Of course, today you look at the YouTube, there are all the singers are singing about, oh, I'm so in love, I'm so in love. Sorry. Right? So it's changing a little bit. But traditionally, that's the way the Mongol men and the steppe men in general, I'm not talking about Mongolians, but steppe culture in general, rape was not a part of it. Now, there were tribes where the kidnapping of women is very important, as a part of their way to get wives. And I'd already mentioned the way that Genghis Khan's wife and mother had been kidnapped. So that's a certain sense of rape, some people might say. But that is not the same as going into warfare and then raping women the way it's done in many other societies. To my knowledge, it did not happen. I cannot prove this, but no one can prove to me that it did happen, or no one has the real evidence for it. He was ethical in war, not because he was a feminist. This is what I've been accused of before, saying he's an environmentalist because he wanted to destroy all irrigation and return the land to the pasture. No, he liked horses. Or that they say that I try to make him out as a feminist because he outlawed the kidnapping of women and the sale of women. and he gave a certain amount of power to his daughter. No, he did that because he was a practical man. That's what worked. It stopped warfare, feuding. So he was a practical man, but a very ethical man.
Time for maybe one more.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tierney. Earlier during the night, you contrasted how Genghis Khan handled warfare in the Middle East to how the United States handled it more recently. Are there any more examples you can think of off the top of your head where, how do I put this, where more contemporary leaders and nations have blundered where Genghis Khan has succeeded?
Yes. If you think about, the Mongols took Iraq and held it for 100 years. Genghis Khan took Afghanistan, held it for 100 years. We are not able to do, he took it in a matter of months. We have been fighting years in those two countries. And to this day, of course, we really cannot say that we have taken those, that we took those countries. We have been fighting on, so I think both of those examples have lots of things to offer. His whole approach that I mentioned with Baghdad, don't set up your headquarters inside their headquarters, that's their strong point. You don't build your headquarters inside their city, you build it somewhere else. They ended up in the area called Tabriz. These type of things I think were very important. But also if you look back to World War II, he also took, his soldiers took Russia and held it for hundreds of years. The Germans tried to take it. Napoleon tried to take it. They did not take it. So I think there are lots of things that can be learned. And in fact, the secret history was mostly ignored, even after being discovered 150 years ago. It was mostly ignored until the advent of World War II. It looks like we're going to have another war. The Russians are going to be fighting against the Germans at some point. Both sides are suddenly thinking only one person has ever conquered, the Mongols. The secret history probably has the secret to that. Both sides started racing to translate it, and they both did. It turned out there was no secret in there to how to conquer it. But in World War, the thing that was different about 20th century warfare was that it was very similar to Mongolian warfare, and it was based upon speed, upon communication. And until this point in history, aside from the Mongols and the steppe tribes, mostly you could say that the infantry, the artillery, and the cavalry were quite separate. The people who rode to war were, in the West especially, more aristocrats, richer people. They were fighting in one way. And then the people with the bows and arrows, that wasn't the king, he wasn't out there with the bow and arrow. The people who were fighting with bows and arrows would often be, they would walk or be carted in to battle. They would get in their station. They would come down. So your artillery and your cavalry are separate. Mongols united. The Mongols had no infantry under Genghis Khan. Later they added. Under Genghis, there was only one thing. That was the Mongol army, and that was the cavalry. You're riding in. You're shooting the whole time. You are the cavalry and the artillery, the infantry, everything in one. 20th century, we begin to get something like that with the tank, for example, or even the Jeep to some extent begins to help. We begin to have mounted weapons that are moving around with the people. So then all of a sudden, there was this great interest in Genghis Khan. I think that there are things like that for which we could learn from him with the way that they fought with movement and with uniting that, in this case, the firepower. Even though some of the early airplanes, to a certain extent, the person was fighting with these air fights as they were going through. So I think there was a lot, even now, that we could learn from him. But it goes back to, I think, having a vision. It's not all strategy. It's not all tactics. It's not a list of things I can list about learning from our mistakes and so on. It's about a person who has a vision, and I think that he did have that. I'm not sure that there are many leaders in the world today. I'm not even sure if there's any leader in the world today. And I don't care what party you belong, whether you're talking about the United States or you're talking about China or Russia or everyone. I'm not sure that there are leaders who have a vision today. I'm not sure that they have a real understanding. They have words. They throw up like confetti, and I don't know. And anyway, I'm old, you know. Times are wrong. It used to be good. It used to be good 800 years ago. But I think there are lessons. And it's not for me, you know, I just talk about one aspect, but there are other people who know many other things many other aspects of life that can study some of these and come up with totally different things than I've seen. And I certainly hope that people do. There's much to be learned from him, I believe. That's a great last question. I thank you very much. I hope you will all go to Mongolia. Miat Airlines are wonderful airlines. They need pilots. They have lots of international pilots. Other airlines are coming in. Come to Mongolia. We are waiting for you. We will welcome you, and we will have all the horse milk you want to drink.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.